wanted to share a couple of other stories about money. And really, what I've come to realize is as you trust and obey whatever God is saying to you, then He will provide. Because if He wants you to do something, He has to provide the provision. And sometimes He wants you to work, but sometimes He just wants you to do what He's asking you to do. And as you do that, you will see that God always provides. So, I shared in my last video about money about this conference in Italy that I went to. Well, while I was at that conference, I was sharing with some of the Christians about how God heals today, and many of the stories about how God has healed in Japan. Because I feel like many times in America, in Europe, in Japan, a lot of first world nations, many Christians don't really believe that God still heals. It was something He did in the past. Whereas if you go to poor countries, everybody's very open to that and still feels like God does the supernatural. And so we're sharing a lot of the stories of how God has healed people in Japan. Honestly, in Japan, I actually never met somebody who was hard of hearing or deaf that didn't get healed when we prayed. And so I was sharing story after story with this lady of Cambodia, India, Japan, just all sorts of stories. And then she told me that she needed a healing. And so I prayed for her. And after I prayed for her, she just felt like she was healed. And so we just rejoiced. And then she pulled out some money. And so one of the issues that I'd had in Japan was I felt like because all these healings were taking place, people were paying me for healing. And I would always say, no, healing is free. And I'd give them back their money that they'd given me, and then they'd give it back to me, and then I'd give it back to them, and they'd give it back to me, and then there'd be this awkward little fight. And I'd be like, healing is free, and they'd say, we're not paying you for healing, we just like you. And the translators would say, they're honestly not paying you for healing, they just want to support your ministry, they like you, they like the work that you're doing, this is not payments. And everybody would try to convince me that I was wrong in what I was thinking. And at the end of the day, how long do you fight with somebody who's trying to bless you? And then consistently, everybody, every translator, everybody, everywhere I went said the same thing. So even though it felt wrong to me all the time, at the end of the day, I would take the money. And honestly, who doesn't need money? But it just always felt wrong. And so now when this lady pulled out the money, there was no translator. It was just us talking to each other in English. And so I said to her, you know what? Healing is free. I don't want your money. I don't need your money. God just wants to heal you. And He has. And so she kept the money, but then as we kept talking, she gave me the money again, and she said, oh, it's not for you, it's for your church. And I told her, oh, I'm an evangelist, I don't have a church, I just go from church to church. And so she kept the money again, and then a little while later, as we were talking, she gave me the money again, and she's like, it's not for your church, it's for somebody who is in need. And at that time, I had been praying, and I'd been telling God, like, I'm so glad that you provide for all my needs, but I would love to be able to have extra money that I can just give to people, because there's lots of people in need and I want to be able to provide for them. And so I thought, oh, maybe this is God's way of doing it. And so I took the money and I put it in my purse. And then as we were talking some more, it just still felt wrong to me. So I pulled it out and I said, I am so sorry. I just cannot take your money. And when I gave it to her, she just started crying. And she was like, oh, so healing really is free. And I was like, oh my goodness, all this time I have been telling, like it had been like 3 to 4, maybe even 5 years that I've been in Japan at that time. And I was like, I have been telling everybody that I'm getting paid for healing, and they've all been telling me no, but the truth is that's what's been happening. And so when I went back to Japan, every church I would speak at, I would just tell them, look, this happened. And so if I pray for you and you get healed, I absolutely, for no reason at all, will take your money because healing truly is free. And the weird thing is, you would think I would be in want after that, but my finances just increased. And there was another incident that happened around the same time. So there was this denominations president that took a liking to me, and he just really just wanted to support my work in Japan. And so he offered to support me as one of their missionaries, and there would be no strings attached in terms of I could go anywhere I wanted to. I could say whatever I wanted to. I didn't have to be bound in any way. I would just be their missionary. And it sounded great, except I have this thing about denominations. I just don't like the division that denominations cause. So, some people are like, I'm Presbyterian or I'm Pentecostal or I'm Baptist, and that's fine for them. But for me, I just feel like it creates division inside of Christianity. And I just wanted to be known as a Christian missionary, not as a denominational missionary. And so after thinking it over, I decided I was going to go to their annual meeting and then tell them, I'm sorry, I don't want the money, but I really appreciate the thought behind offering it to me. But before I had a chance to say anything, the president went behind closed doors, came out and announced it to the entire denomination at their national meeting that the denomination was going to be supporting me. And unlike their own local Japanese missionaries, they weren't going to support me for 3 years. They were going to support me for the entire time that I lived in Japan. And so at that point, obviously, I couldn't say anything because I had just been granted this great honor by the president of this denomination. And so I took the money for a year, but the whole time it felt really weird to me and wrong. And so as the second year was approaching, I was like, I have to decide, am I going to take this money or am I not? And so I was struggling and trying to figure out what the right thing was. I was talking to the pastor and her daughter at the church that I was staying at and explaining the situation. And they were like, why wouldn't you take it? Like, they just want to support you. There's literally no strings attached. And I was like, yeah, but this is the whole principle of the thing. And so then I was talking to my brother. He came online as I was, and it was just so fortunate because I needed to make a decision within a day or two. And I was telling him what was on my mind, and he said, so let me get this right. So you won't take the money based on principle, but you would take the money because you don't trust God. And as soon as you said that, I was like, okay, yes, thank you for clarifying that. So I told the president of the denomination at the next meeting, I'm so sorry, I love you guys, I love working with you, and I want to continue doing it, but I just can't take the money anymore. And again, you would think that the money would decrease at that point in time, and I would be lacking, but again, the money increased. So in my time in Japan, I went from not having enough and being in the red, and then God would provide whatever I had spent, to always breaking even, the money coming in right at the right time, to having more than enough. I literally always had $200, $300 extra in my wallet. So God is just a good God, and you just trust and you obey, and whatever He says, just do it, and it will be perfect. And He knows what He's doing.